All right, everyone. Hope you guys are here to visit Breanne and see what she has to talk about today. Breanne, take it away.
All right. Hey, good afternoon. I'm so glad you're all here. For the next 25-ish minutes, we are going to talk about threat modeling, and we're going to make it cute, as you can see. As an introduction, my name is Breanne Boland. I work in product security at Gusto. I really like threat modeling in part because it puts structured thinking and a salary on top of my natural paranoia and imagination, and that makes me very happy. I also write a lot of fiction, which I think uses a lot of the same skills of just kind of looking around corners. And at a human element, I am currently taking a stained glass class. It is a blast, although soldering stained glass and soldering circuit boards, very different motions, and artists will laugh at you a little bit when you adapt. This is me after visiting the Canadian Embassy at the Toronto airport last month. So what we're going to talk about, we are going to look into the past of our fictional product, look at the advice we've previously given our engineering team, because we are all now the product security team together, by the way. You're deputized, it's happening today. And then we're going to look forward at a very new and different feature that they are proposing, which requires us to stop the gentle complacency that can creep in if you get used to things and look at things a little differently. And then at the end, we're going to talk about how to relate this stuff usefully to the people that need to hear it. A useful note, philosophically, there is security that sometimes has to demand. This is security that is more about suggesting. We are advising, not dictating. We are here to make friends and keep them, ideally. So we want to suggest rather than just telling people what their business is. It also happens to be the philosophy of security at the company I work at, which is part of why I took the job. So we want to point out risk and offer mitigations, and we pop in a consultative way rather than being consistently embedded or making a bunch of demands of people all the time. So let's talk our product. We work for a wildly popular snack loyalty app called Snack Tracker. And the new product they're looking to debut is called Snack Adder, because I guess there's a Rowan Atkinson fan in product, which we love to see. So Snack Tracker offers snack tracking and a rewards website, but they want to go bigger. We've had a popular app for a long time, both mobile and web, and we want to partner with fine snack shops across our test region to have in-person check-ins and bonuses, adding an extra dimension to the experience that just wasn't there before. What we want to do is have tablets of some kind, specifics not determined yet, where users can go and they can log snacks to their wish lists, they can check into specific locations, they can get big rewards at special events, something that hasn't been possible till now. We have previously expanded existing features, but it's been a while since we've had something completely new, and both product and security teams can get used to things, and it's time for us to break out. To give you a sense of context of where we're coming from, up until now there have been two kinds of users. There are shop owners, and there are snack fiends. Shop owners need to see customer details, snack trends and reviews, and cash out loyalty points. Snack fiends, however, need to see their account details and point balances, learn about events, enter and update their snack preferences, and adjust communication details. Yeah, pretty normal stuff. Both types of users logged into the same mobile and web apps. Any differences came from authorization after they were logged in. So our challenge is that all previous threat modeling and security guidelines were done in the context of this specific use. You could depend on things like users entered their username and their definitely long, random, used only once passwords because our users are the best people in the world, because this is my story and it can be that way. And that meant that only one, maybe two users would use a single device ever, which made things like convincing people to do MFA easy. Those snack points are popular, and we also bribed people with bonus points for setting it up. The way we approached it before, sessions for snack fiends, if they checked they were on a private device, lasted up to a month. And this was easy because it was only on their own device, no sharing. Shop owners, it was a little less. We did kind of more of a bank credit card model because there's transactions going on there. So we logged them out after a minute or two of inactivity. And it's useful to remember, snack fiends are not used to needing to log out after app use, and that's something we're going to have to account for. Looking forward, though, the in-person team is super psyched. They want a simpler way for users to check in at this in-person shared device that doesn't involve those long, complex, beautiful passwords and the MFA we've previously pushed them into. Instead, the user's only going to interact with the tablet for a minute, maybe less. So enter Snack Adder. The snack fiends want to log snacks and get rewards. The shop owners want to allow the customers to log snacks and also not have more work or a new vulnerability to worry about. So our goal is to offer actionable security advice to a product team that is excited to move fast. We want to protect our users and their data. And we also want the product team to want to talk to us after this is all over. Let's look at the advice we've given them before. And an aside, if you haven't bumped into threat modeling, it's a good day because you're about to learn something really cool. At its core, it's just an organized way of examining something, feature, product, system, situation, and looking at where risk might occur. We look for opportunities where vulnerabilities could be exploited. We want to quantify what we find so that it's understandable and actionable. And then we want to offer assessments and guidance to those responsible for what's being evaluated so they can make things better for our users. There are lots of good threat modeling frameworks out there and lots of opinions about them. If you haven't dug into it before, look up Stride, Pasta, MITRE ATT&CK if you want to get a sense of how big the world is and what you don't know yet. For us, though, we're going to do it a little more informally and just kind of look piece by piece at what we're dealing with. Tales of the past. What have we told them about web and mobile app stuff? And past context matters when you're working with the same engineers across time because you get the chance to either give them deeper knowledge when you're bringing up something familiar again or point out that there's something completely new coming up. So if you get to build those relationships, a little bit of depth gets to emerge as you do that. So in our case, some of the engineers there are familiar with, or people we've worked with. They've brought some new folks in for this new initiative too. So this is something that we would ask them to review anyway. So like encryption. We give the usual advice, encrypt things in transit and rest. Use a good, current industry standard encryption cipher. And for this, because we're a good full-service security team, we point to our robust library of available knowledge, and we say, hey, check this out. We keep this up to date for you. We update it every 6 months or as necessary, whichever comes first. And it lets people stay on top of things. Authentication's similar. As it happens, at Snack Tracker, we have an authentication team because we are blessed. And we're able to say, hey, just talk to them about what we have been doing lately. Just do that. There are great things to innovate on. We recommend for this, just going with it because we trust our team. Authorization, along with just having certain actions attached to the user, we also want to make sure that in code, connected to, different functions that they might access, that they're allowed to do that. Sessions, as I said, not too short, not too long, varying depending on the function that's actually going on there. For user info, things like, please use UUIDs rather than anything sequential that you can enumerate or possibly brute force. Scope user permissions appropriately for both regular users and admins. Going to secure libraries, going back to that robust library of recommendations, we say, please, if you can, go and pick something off the menu there. If not, we'll dig into it for you. And we also, of course, mandate use of Dependabot because we like ourselves. Privacy concerns. So we have a really wonderful, tight relationship with the legal team. I like them because they are word-based organisms, which I also am. But we also have a lot in common, so it makes more sense if we work really tightly together. And as a result, we're a security team that can give some guidance around the laws of various states and countries, things around data retention, what you should do. Deeper questions, we're like, you should go talk to a lawyer about that. But for this, we also push a very specific philosophy of data, which is, please do not ask for it. Please do not store it if we do not actually need it. Does it pertain to snacks? No, don't ask. So in this case, do we care about someone's gender if they just want a snack? I certainly hope not. So if we don't need it, don't request it, and we don't have to worry about it. But let's look to the future. Going back to that last question. So how little data can we collect with this particular feature? And in ways, this is better and easier because the scope of it is going to be so much less. There are going to be a really limited number of actions that a user can take within what they're proposing. And it does give one interesting opportunity. So because we have a very healthy respect for our snack fiends, we have never collected location data before. We just didn't want to get it off their mobile device just because it makes us feel funny and we don't like that. However, if someone opts into using a device that's tied to location, that's very different. So we have the opportunity to collect geographical information when people do check-ins. Other than that, though, because this is so pared down, there are much less concerns. Next up, and this is one of the big interesting questions here, how is authentication going to work if they don't want to use something that is so similar to everything else, everything that this company has ever done? And we like encouraging developer teams to do new things. We like innovation, it's great. But we want to make sure they're imagining in the good way and not going toward things that we just don't want to invite in the house. So in this case, what kind of credential or login method is appropriate for one-time use without a user session that persists? We're not expecting people to type in their long, unique passwords on an unfamiliar device when a line of frantic snack fiends is developing behind you, as some of you might relate to with what you just experienced in the hallway because of conferences. So what are we going to do instead? So one option that's proposed by our team, who are wonderful enough to come up with ideas and bring them to us, what about a PIN? What if it's only used for this specific thing? You couldn't enter it as a password. You can just enter a PIN. And then, people have a context for it with phones, with ATMs. They'll, go right with it. And we say, yeah, thank you for suggesting that. It's a very interesting idea. Ultimately, we decide, we'll keep it in mind. We want to stay open. But security feels a little queasy about making an equivalence between a even 6 or 8 digit PIN and a proper password. So we're like, yeah, thank you for thinking of that. What else do you have? And the next idea they bring, also interesting, meaning that in the good way. I've seen this call. I haven't seen a really specific, consistent term for it. So I'm going to call it second screen authentication. If you know a term that everyone knows for it, I want you to come and tell me, because I have had fruitless Googling around this. This is the kind of authentication where on one device, you have an existing authenticated session, and you want to log in on, say, your TV on a streaming service, and you don't want to put your password in using a remote control because we only have so many hours in the day. So instead, what you do is give it your user ID. It gives you a short code. 6 letters is what I've usually seen. You enter it into an authenticated session, and hey, it's Hulu. Wonderful. And we're like, yeah, that's interesting. People have the context for that. People are getting used to that. It's definitely shorter. And that establishes a different kind of session is happening. There's a paradigm for this. Cool, right. So we consider that that is a decent suggestion. But our product team loves us, and they have another option. And they say, what about a QR code? And they explain that what they're picturing is and they can predict some of our arguments. They're like, it'll be dynamically generated. It won't be static all the time, not easy to share. It'll be unique to a person. And they generate it on their device and just go, boop, and they're in. And so we think about that, and considering the level of state change happening here, the data involved, this could be a good thing. So officially we say, we'll go off and think about that, but what we're really going to do is go and further refine our existing guidance around things like sanitizing input, just to educate our team about the weird, sneaky stuff that can be stuck in QR codes. Then there's the question of authorization. And that's really key here because the whole thing revolves around a scoped down set of operations. And this gets interesting too because roles and permissions are often really foundational in a product. They're innate to an MVP, literally what can people do here? But the ownership of it and sometimes the fragility of code can mean that later on it gets really weird to change stuff. And there are a couple ways this can exist. One is that either people are very protective, reasonably, or otherwise it's not easy to make changes, and so it becomes kind of calcified and people have to work around it in weird ways. Not ideal. The other version is that it is too easy to change things, and that means you end up with this big chaos Katamari ball of things that the original role designers did not intend and did not foresee. And across time, you can have really weird side effects, hitting up a certain API endpoint and going, I did not ask for this, and who is this person's medical information? So the recommended approach that we end up coming up with, in part because we don't want to just do unnecessary edits to the existing permissions, is to think of it like third-party integration, where you give an API key, think like a GitHub personal access token. Your account might have all these permissions, but the token might have this one. And so that's what we're doing here. That's what we encourage the team to do. And we're talking to them fairly early. No code has been written yet, so we can be kind of high level about this and be like, yeah, come back and tell me exactly how you implement that. I would love to see it. So in this case, it would allow admin functions just saying you are authorized to say, I belong to this place. People can log into this store within this session. And then it will do one-off operations for users who connect to the store through that device. There's also the question then of how to invalidate it. The snack shop owner situation gets interesting because, like a lot of small businesses, the owner is not necessarily there every day, and they definitely don't necessarily want to give an admin level password to someone who maybe works there 10 hours a week. So the compromise that we reach is we say, hey, yeah, this session can be 2 weeks. And if you find that's not long enough and people still need more than that, come back and we'll talk and we'll look at your user research and see what we can reasonably recommend. But it flips, though, with the snack fiends, that instead we say, we want this to be limited to a single operation. They boop, and then they log one snack. They boop, and they check in once, and that's it. And also we recommend, by the way, we need to have it possible to revoke this tablet session in case that tablet grows legs. So then there's the question of asking them to drill down more into what the state changes can be. Things like, for the snack fiend, password changes, redemptions of points, because that requires a cashier, stuff like that, totally off limits. It's only just, here's my account, I want to do a check-in or an activity that gets me points. I want this new, very exotic flavor of hot Cheetos. That's what we're going to do. And then there's the physical context, which historically we mostly haven't had to worry about. Because unlike the current shop owner use, instead of the admin level device being right in front of them, it might be across the store behind a giant display of cookies. It might be out of sight because it doesn't require attending. So then what are our expectations? For putting it in place, for initial setup, the shop owners aren't necessarily there every day, and we really can't, in the way of small businesses, expect a dedicated technical staff. I suspect a lot of people in this room have been the go-to dedicated technical contact for some of your friends and relatives. That's the best we can expect, is someone like us just being drawn in. So we need to keep it pretty simple, and it becomes more and more in our interest to offer some security guidance because the folks that are involved in doing this stuff probably aren't familiar with a lot of that. Then there's the question of what this thing's actually going to be. In the way of product folks who've been talking to marketing, our team comes to us with really big ideas. They say words like custom form factor, which feels bad to hear. They say, what if we got into device manufacturing? What if there was branding? It could be immersive. Yeah, it's a whole experience. And they start using nice, big, lofty, high-level words. And that's when we start going, I'm writing this down. It's a very interesting idea. But we want to be encouraging. So what we do is listen to what they want to do and then scurry off and talk amongst ourselves. And in this case, we decide pretty quickly, we do not want to be in the business of device manufacturing. We are in the business of recording details about chips. That is a very different thing, and we don't think we're ready yet. However, this is the kind of recommendation I would escalate pretty highly before I actually said anything like that. Because maybe, who knows, in some 2 years ahead of us plan, there is something that says, like, you know what we need to do is like custom tablets for the chip people. So what I would do is go talk to my manager and probably also go say hello to our CISO just to say, hey, I heard this. I'm not married to a feeling either way yet, but like, tell me what you think about this. And in the case of our story, I get a nice, wide-eyed, long couple seconds of silence before getting confirmation that, no, we don't want to do that because manufacturing devices is a completely different kettle of fish. That is not a snack that our snack fiends are eager for. And it also would require hiring for skills we've never had to hire for in order to do this even vaguely effectively. So this becomes, in the way of ranking recommendations, kind of, I'm afraid I must insist on this. We'll call it a do-level recommendation compared to try and consider. So fortunately, we've all agreed over in security, we don't want to get into the business of specialized device manufacture. We as a security team can go off and have a sigh of relief and maybe just go have a nice fizzy beverage to commemorate that our lives aren't getting that much worse today. Instead, what we say is, hey, what we could do, we could offer security guidance to shop owners for choosing the device, for equipping it, definitely for keeping it up to date, providing them security advisories that they might not encounter in the way of their regular business, especially because we can definitely expect some secondhand device use in the mix in the way of people being resourceful. All right, so we've got some initial recommendations for what our product team is proposing. How do we explain it effectively? There are a few ways. One of the ones I really like to be good on is having very, very clear and as concise as possible recommendations in a written form. This is worth spending some time on and doing a few drafts. If you are not thrilled about this work, which is valid, give it a shot and then reach out to someone, maybe on your team, even better, someone who's kind of like the sort of people you're trying to reach with this stuff, to get them to look it over and say, hey, you hit it, or just like, yeah, this paragraph, I read it and I don't actually know what you want me to do. I just think you're kind of mad at me. So get that second opinion, just keep refining, and just remember, like, it's a skill like anything else. It takes time to really nail it. It's also useful just whenever you can to ground things in really specific security principles. This gives us consistency across time, which is super useful. But also when you work with teams a lot, they will start to be able to get a sense of what you're going to say before you say it and do preventative work to answer your questions before you raise them. And this is the best thing. And to cultivate that, it is useful to offer some knowledge to people. It doesn't have to be exhaustive. It can just be a link at the end going, hey man, if you want to know more about this, you might really enjoy this blog post from a couple of years ago that explains it well. This is a favorite of mine because it is a big part of how I became a security engineer. Getting to read more stuff that connected somewhat to the work I was doing, but added new depth and explained what the coworkers I really liked were up to. Super useful, and also really good for the relationship building. Beyond that, I am afraid I'm here to tell you that sometimes you need to go to more meetings. But some of them are good, actually, and some of them are necessary. Meetings are good when relaying your recommendations if it's a team you're not familiar with and you don't know yet how they're going to react. It's really good to be there to see the misconceptions come into place and get ahead of them, just kind of like throw yourself in front of it. It also keeps you from relying on third-party versions of what you sent over. People like to read and interpret, and it ends up in a game of tech telephone, and that is very painful. And we can avoid it in part by showing up. You don't have to do it all the time, but just especially when initiating relationships, it's a really good idea just to have it be a conversation. But of course, make sure your recommendations stand on their own too, because they are going to persist so much longer. It is also useful to maintain a philosophy of offering help, that we are here to assist and not to prohibit. We are there to enable people to do their jobs and not have sad times. We're trying to make their lives better and their products, and we actually are allies, even if sometimes people don't feel like it or they've had days at other jobs where that actually wasn't the case. We can do some good by healing things over a little bit. And finally, ask for feedback. Ask for feedback a lot. Ask for it in different forms. Here is my survey link. Here is where you should DM me. Here is the official feedback form. Here is what I want to know about in particular. I tried this thing. Can you tell me if it worked for you? If not, do you have any ideas about what would work better? The more you ask for it, the more people will believe that you actually mean it. And across time, you will get a steady flow of more information. So keep soliciting it. It's how we get better. It can feel funny, but it's great actually. And finally, takeaways for you. Push against complacency. It is a lot easier to do it if you're doing it regularly instead of just when you see something completely new and go like, oh yeah, I need to shift my brain into something different. The more you can try to cultivate beginner's mind, treat every new feature like you're first falling in love. It's useful, and it's better to cultivate it as a habit rather than having to massively course correct after you've really become entrenched in something. Just try creative things to explain things well. That can be that really good, concise description of what you need. I like metaphors. That's not everyone's strength, but it's useful to be able to cycle through a couple comparisons of things and then see someone's eyes light up as you see them get it. Super gratifying, and it works really well. When you're relaying stuff, try to cut the noise, reduce things as much as you can so that it's straightforward, reads easy, and there's no question about what you're asking people to do. And make it clear when you're talking to people that you actually are here to encourage their cool, ambitious technical work rather than be an obstacle. We're not just here to penalize things with heavier overhead. We're just here to make sure that they can actually do the things they want and not have it cause a terrible week 6 months in the future. And finally, ask the people you serve how you can do better over and over and mean it every time. Thank you very much.
Folks, we have a little bit of wiggle room if you have questions for Breanne. We have maybe one or two questions.
Yeah, so let's say after AUTHN is done, you briefly talked about providing some recommendation docs, but if you provide them the Jira tickets as a test ticket, am I going to the wrong direction, or recommendation doc is enough?
Okay, the question was about once you formulated your recommendations, and correct me if I'm wrong, if they're just being put into JIRA tickets, is that the wrong direction for actually getting them adopted? Did that sum it up? No, it's part of the right direction for sure. Things do need to be tracked. If you just put something in like a Google Doc or a Confluence page, it's a great way to never see it again. So I like the combination of like, I have written something for you and it is connected to these tickets so that they actually offer some kind of accountability and usually a deadline, and you can assign it to someone. So no, they're actually incredibly useful. If you're a tiny company, you can probably get away with just like, I have crafted for you this finest report. It will definitely do everything that I want. But if you're more than about 5 people, like, yeah, you want somewhere central to track all that stuff and just do a lot of linking back and forth. Yeah, thanks.
Any other questions? Feel free to raise your hand. I'll walk up with the mic if you can't speak louder.
Right here.
Yeah, how can you make sure that one of the things that you talked about is going to meetings to explain the recommendations that you're making.
Mm-hmm.
How can you make sure that you're included on those meetings rather than them happening without your knowledge?
Okay, yeah, the question was those meetings to follow up on things, how do you make sure you're actually included in them instead of them happening when you don't know? Part of it is being a ruthless stalker of calendars. It's not my favorite method, but it is one way. Just if you know certain people that are going to be involved in it, yeah, be a giant Google Calendar creep. It is useful. It's not the softest method, but it will get you your answers. Beyond that, just like having those regular conversations and checking in, saying like, I actually do care about this. Hey, please involve me. Generally, you can't ask too many times and be ignored without the other person looking kind of awful. So neither of these things is 100%, but together they end up covering a lot of it. You know, the other thing is that a lot of this, you know, in my experience, I've had conversations with the folks involved across time. It's how I knew they had anything to review. So we just stay conversational, and, you know, I put extra effort into like making it a bubbly, candy colored experience. Sometimes people respond well to it, and it lets you get actual security work done too. Thanks.
Yet again, one more question over here.
I asked on the internet, and I think it's called device authorization flow. The name of that paper.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Second screen authentication is called device authentication flow. Now the talk is officially worth it. Thank you. It's really bothered me. Yeah, now we all learned. Cool.
Once again, let's give Breanne a Theater 15